So I was recently introduced to Canvas board, which is similar to Gesso board, only this has the canvas texture on it. It gives you the sturdiness of the board, but also the feeling of a canvas, which is the best of both worlds. Quite like this. Now, these ones I found at Michael's. They are the Artist Loft brand. I'll take you through my personal process of this painting, so that way you can see something entirely new created on this styled medium. As much as I love using regular canvases, I also enjoy trying out new mediums to work on. It really brings me outside of that comfort zone that I've set for myself. I've realized that continuously painting or doing any sort of craft the same way can really affect the way that I think, meaning I feel as though that it'll just get overly boring or monotonous. It's really just the same pattern over and over by creating the same ideas, and that's just the way that I think about it. I'm preparing this surface to work on by creating a smoother layer on this board to dull out the canvas texture. Now, I'm using regular white gesso and a tool that I found at Michael's to spread it across evenly. This process in itself was a couple of hours because later I eventually went back outside to throw down another layer. I didn't record that because it was dark outside already at that time. So this is going to take some time to dry, so while I wait, I'm going to go ahead and get some inspiration. After countless hours of searching the web and browsing through Pinterest, I was not feeling inspired. At this point in time, I was at a block. Artist block was hitting the hardest. It was looking as though that I was at some sort of dead end because I just could not figure out what to paint. I knew I didn't want to do something that was already created. I wanted to do something that was brand new, something that hadn't been painted before, in terms of something that just isn't an image off of Pinterest. And after countless hours of thinking, it hit me. I decided to set up a little photo shoot for a still life reference. I found an old sheet laying around. Anyways, I decided to rip the sheet apart because it was a fitted sheet, so it had that elastic band around and couldn't lay flat. By ripping it and cutting it up, it allowed me to flatten it out and use it as a background. I found that I also have a couple of these nice looking glass containers that I've actually picked up in the past from different thrift stores or Target, and I thought they were perfect for this idea. Along with the glass bottles, I did find some candlesticks and some glass bowls, and for the aesthetic, I threw a couple of grapes in the bowl to bring it all together. Now, I did take a lot of pictures in different styles and variations, but I settled on just one. I decided I didn't like the candlesticks at all too much because it really didn't fit with the vibe that I was going for. Something about it just looked off to me. So I decided to take the candlestick out. I ended up going with this one. I did tweak the lighting a bit so the colors can stand out a bit more, and the saturation was a bit brighter so that way it made the colors pop a little bit more. And a side note, when I was at Michael's, I picked up this white sweater to use whenever I do these paintings. The amount of shirts that I go through that have 1 or 2 paint marks on it is actually crazy. I decided to take a stand and say that I've had enough, so I figured this would just be a good painting uniform. So here I am giving the now dry canvas board an undertone wash. This step isn't necessarily important, it's there to help the base color not be so bright in the back, so this kind of darkens it a bit, aside from painting on just the plain white. I printed out the reference photo as you can see in the back here. However, I only used this to shape things out initially because the colors came out super dull and dark. My printer kind of sucked on this part. But even still, with laying out the shapes, it's just to get a general idea of where everything will go. It's the next day, which means that it's time to throw down some paint. I went back over it earlier to try and correct some of the proportions a bit. The side of it was just unbearable to look at because the sizing was a bit off. Fairly confident that the first layer of paint going on should have no issues. So laying down the first layer of green, I decided to go with the Artist Loft brand oils on a majority of the paint you'll see me use. Honestly, I think that they are wonderful to work with. Now, this shade of green is not the final color. The amount of times that I changed this shade of green still haunts me. I didn't want this painting to be one of those hyper-realistic looking pieces. For one, it probably would have taken more time to even get to that point. Secondly, let's be real, I think I need way more practice actively working on hyper-realism. but for a first go or a test run, this is going to work with my normal process. Looking back, one huge reoccurring issue I had was color matching and really just getting the right tone or saturation to the lighting into the painting itself to look as natural as possible. Despite not trying to do hyperrealism, I still want it to make sense while looking at it. The good thing about oil paints is that they don't dry up on you, which is what I love as opposed to when working with acrylics. Even with certain mediums or solutions, oils tend to be more lenient on the canvas because you can push around the colors or even mix on the board as needed with enough time to make those changes. What I'm noticing so far on this board too is that it feels like I don't have to press too hard into it to get the brush and the paint to stick, due to it being all one flat surface and sturdy due to the board. Rather than a regular canvas having to press down a little bit more each time into the canvas to get the color to stick, it really sinks in a bit more each step. So this is after the first day of painting. This is just the first base layer of paints. Right now it's still currently in that ugly stage of painting. As you can see, it looks a little blocky with all of the shapes here. So the colors are not where I want them to be, obviously, because again, it's just the first layer. I'm going to go back in and touch up some of the details here once I get into more of the layers, but I'm calling it a night on this. I'll pick back up on it later. So right now it's day 5 on working on this painting. At least I think so, if I can remember. I took a couple of days in between each of those days in order to, not get burnt out on this. The base layer is kind of drying a little bit, and so I'm just going back over it with more and more layers, trying to refine a little bit more of the lines to kind of match up to the reference. I did a bit of off-screen painting sessions where I would take 30 minutes to about an hour each day to add or change something I didn't like. I really wanted to space this one out as long as I could because rushing this project wouldn't have been the best for me. From what it was a week ago to how it is now is much more of a visible difference. So after a couple of hours of work, I decided to go back over the grapes with a much more lighter tone to give it a little bit more of a texture. And then, as you can see all around, I went ahead and I took the shade of green that was there and brought it down to this darker mint. Now, on this image right here, you can't really tell because this printer sucked when printing out the picture. But overall, I'd say it got pretty close. A couple of the containers here, they kind of still look very dull and not so much in their transparent look. I think I'm happy with the way that the grapes turned out so far. If I decide to make any changes to them, I'll probably just throw that in there. Overall, I think at least this side of everything looks close to being done. The containers here, got to go back in and add in some of the highlighted areas. I find that even the glass in its simplest form can be very challenging. The way that the light in the picture makes it look super dark in other areas, yet placing those same colors down on the canvas kind of just still seemed off. It didn't really sit right with me. The majority of the time, it's best to shift your focus on another part of the painting and then come back to it at a later time, which is exactly what I did. Now, the main reason for this project was to test the waters on branching out to these different materials to use as an artist. A few other painters that I take much inspiration from use primarily canvas board or gesso board to paint on, and with me personally have only using stretched canvases. I suppose it's really based on personal preference. I find there to be more pros than cons on this style of medium. If the painting flops, then I stick to what I know. I mean, so far I can't really say that I have much of an issue with it. It really is working a charm for my first run. I'm a little over halfway through the painting. My palette has filled up to the point where there is currently no room to mix any fresh colors or anything new. So I took a break to clear off any paint that I wasn't going to use anymore, which was all of it. Here's where I'm now attempting to add more detail to the background, since this was hanging sheet, the light created a lot of these deep shadow pockets, causing the color to fluctuate between light and dark in certain areas. I try to match the original color I used for the background, as well as some variations between dark and light. I'm using yellow to brighten it up instead of white, because the white makes it look a little bit too pale. Same thing with the darker colors. I end up using a bit of a darker blue to get it to that point. I'm nearing the end, and I'm comfortable enough to say that this is finished. I'm using a soft bristle brush to push around some of the color to blend it in without leaving any hard lines or heavy brush marks. I set my brush down and I take a solid look at it. I go back in to add a few more highlights in the areas where light seemed more harsh. With no mixing involved, I just use titanium white straight from the tube with my most thin line brush. And with that, the painting is complete. So it's been about a week and a half already. I gave it a little bit of extra time to dry up a little bit more. I wouldn't say that it's fully dry, but it's dry enough to the point where I can touch it and the paint does not smear. But here it is. Here's the final piece in its entirety with all of the details in place. Now, with it being this dry at this point, I'm still trying to decide whether if I want to add a layer of matte varnish on the top just to give it a little bit more of a coated finish. I'm just not sure what might look best on this, and I feel like I only have one shot on that. And considering that this took me a little less than a month to finish, I feel like I want to know more what would look better on a canvas board. In the meantime, I picked up this sweet looking frame from Michaels because I've always wanted to see one of my paintings in these cool looking frames. I've been super eager for this to dry. That's why I gave it a little bit of extra time, so that way when I do put it in here, it doesn't smear. All right, so here's the frame. I'm just gonna open it with the little latches here. Now, as for the glass panel, I think I'm just gonna leave it in the frame so that way it acts as like a protective shield, since there's currently no varnish on the canvas board. And as you can see, it is dry to the touch, but there are a few glossy spots here on the canvas that kind of indicate otherwise, but I'm hoping for the best. I gotta make sure it's facing the right way too. There we go. Bit of resistance here. It's in. I haven't seen it yet. I was facing it away as I was walking to the camera. 3, 2, 1. This looks cool. Oh, that's so awesome. Try not to get too much of the glare, but okay, you know what? I'm gonna reposition the camera so that way you can get a better look at it. Okay, so I set it back up on my easel just because this gives the best kind of look at it without any like harsh glare. Oh, never mind. Okay, there we go. With it being in the frame now, honestly, it looks crazy. I am overly satisfied with how this came out, with it being a project that I've done in less than 30 days. Canvas board, honestly, I would definitely use again. I'll probably begin to use them a little bit more often, as you'll see here on the channel. If you stayed to the very end and enjoyed seeing my process on this painting, consider leaving a like and a follow. If you want to see more long-term projects like this, definitely let me know down in the comments below. And be sure to check out some of my other work here on the channel as well. Thank you all for the support, and I'll see you in the next one.